This is Mark Mueller. We are back with the continuation of the Judyth Vary Baker series of interviews. Judyth, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You've written many books, several books anyway. One of those books is one that you worked on when you were here a few years ago on the property next door.
Lee Harvey Oswald and me.
It also has the weaponization of cancer, the monkey virus, and the Kennedy assassination. This was an update to a previous book that you had called Me and Lee.
Yes.
And in this book, I was privileged to be asked to write the afterword. And I also wrote a poem about you and Lee Harvey Oswald, essentially talking about the series of lies that get embedded in our system. And I compared it to being tattooed with government ink. Once you get that tattoo, you can't get it off. And that's something that you've struggled with, and many people have struggled with. And we're now seeing it playing out live in this current day and age of government stories, and they stamp people. You're this or you're that, and it's the branding of the people. It's the branding. It's actually not in a good way branding, but branding like cattle. The foreword to this book was by a guy named Robert Tannenbaum. Now, many people may not know who he is, especially the younger folks. They don't know. This happened a long time ago now. This was 60 years ago, 63 years ago, or 62 years ago. So Robert K. Tannenbaum, who was he?
Bob Tannenbaum is very interesting because he was a gifted lawyer like you. He had never lost a case or anything like that.
I've lost some cases. He has not, though.
He did. He's kind of famous for that. The House Select Committee for Assassinations wanted him to look into the murders of Dr. Martin Luther King and also of Lee Harvey Oswald and Kennedy, JFK. And the reason I mentioned Oswald is because, of course, he was murdered along with them. Now, what's interesting about Tannenbaum is he was working with Richard Sprague and Robert Groden. Robert Groden is still alive. I think, I don't know about Sprague, but I know one thing. They were doing an honest investigation, and they got kicked off because they were getting too close to the truth. Even so, they managed to unearth enough that they had to admit that there had to have been, get this, a conspiracy. There had to be at least one other shot fired. And, of course, the committee said they had not enough money to finish this up, so somebody else, and, of course, the government never went back to check on the conspiracy. They simply went back to the Warren Commission and said, look, there was no conspiracy, even though we had the HSCA, Sprague, Tannenbaum, and Groden, all of them saying, well, wait a minute, we have a conspiracy.
To further this along a little bit for history, there was and people may appreciate this now in light of some of the things that have happened since, but when Kennedy was killed, it was important for the government narrative to put an end to this, to
Yes.
make this one guy, and he was a communist sympathizer, and it was him, and let's not look anywhere else. That was a predetermined thing that was going on.
And that was their only commission.
We see
really,
that.
for that
So now,
commission.
and then there was a panel that was appointed, and what we call the Blue Ribbon Commissions. And at the time, and this is no, it is a statement, I guess, about the times and the way it is. But they were all white men who were in power positions that could be, they were all these men that were well-known, famous people, politicians, people in power. And actually, they even had Allen Dulles, who was a former CIA chief who was fired by Kennedy.
Yeah, hated him.
On this panel that was coming up with this stuff. People that have studied this, and it's a lot of volumes of work, so it takes an enormous effort to get through all these things. But when even if you read what they put out, if they read the background, it doesn't match. First of all, they didn't review, it wasn't a fair investigation, but even what they reviewed, they didn't portray fairly. They portrayed it in a way that would sell, and it would be shut the door. Then there was a effort later on. People got reinterested in the Kennedy assassination, and there was a call for another committee, and this was the House Select Committee that was under the congressional authority. That one is the one you're talking about, that Tannenbaum and some of the other folks were in, and there were some people that were going at that from a perspective of, we really want to find out what's going on, not we're just going to try to cover this up. So, but that didn't go well, and they were blocked also. There were a lot of things going on.
And many, many murders. We had more CIA and FBI murders.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
We're going to do a future show on the odds of all these different people that were witnesses or players dying at critical periods of time, some significant periods where, the first couple of years there were a whole bunch, and then there was some more over time as people became dangerous to the story.
And then bunches again when the HSCA.
Right, bunches of them. I mean, there were literally 6 top FBI guys at least that died of everything from, all kinds of sudden deaths and suicides and killings and everything else, none of which ever really got solved. None of them got solved. And so there were some mobsters that also ended up being killed at the same time when they were being interviewed or about to be interviewed and what have you. There's just an incredible collection of deaths that occurred, and some of the most improbable things that occurred. People supposedly committing suicides with rifles or shotguns, and just shooting.
And we have Richard Sharnon, who a wonderful statistician, who showed we're talking about chances of billions to one.
Yes. So I just wanted to say a couple more things about this. Is that each time there was an organization or effort to reinvestigate or to investigate Kennedy, it met with big obstacles, and then we continued to see this because the documents were sealed at various times for both this and things like the Church Committee that investigated the CIA and some activities later on. And many of these things have been sealed and never revealed to the public. And the documents were sealed for a number of years. They were supposed to be unsealed by numerous presidents, and there have been partial releases. Even now, even when Trump supposedly said, release all of it. We don't have all of it. We don't even have close to all of it. But one quick thing I wanted to introduce into this is that you and anybody who questions the official story is labeled a conspiracy theorist, okay? And I know, and and people that are involved in the research, I had no interest in this until a number of years ago, and then I got into it and started finding things out. And you get down what people call the rabbit holes. It gets very interesting, but you get labeled a conspiracy theorist. The term conspiracy theorist was a label that was developed by the CIA to stamp you with this, so that you are automatically labeled and branded and judged as suspicious because you must be a person that believes in sort of the tinfoil hat crazy stuff. So it's a label. And we see how destructive labels are now, because people are labeled right-wing, they're labeled left-wing, they're labeled trumpets, they're labeled libtards, they're labeled communists, they're labeled whatever. There's labels. And once vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, and there are ways that we are used to divide people and distract from the overall truth of what we're trying to get at. Now let's get back into Lee Harvey Oswald, and we introduced earlier the topic of Mexico and why that's important to this whole thing. And people can read more about this, but what is Mexico City? Why is it important to this story of what really happened? And let's help with your insight that you've figured out so far.
Okay, first of all, everybody, I'll put it this way, everybody knew that Lee Oswald and his wife were not getting along very well, and it'd be nice if they were separated and they go their separate ways, but they get a chance to see his kids. It was not a marriage made in heaven. But one of the things that's peculiar, and this one researcher, David Lifton, noticed, he said, what happened? Because by March, he's not beating her, she's not beating him anymore. They're not giving each other black eyes anymore. He quit. What in the world happened? Can anybody explain it? Well, when he found out I could explain it, he wasn't real happy, because I have different theories. Only my theories are based on the man telling me himself what happened. Lee Oswald, when I found out he hit Marina and they weren't getting along like this, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. You touch her again, forget it. I've seen my father when he was drinking hit my mother, and I'm no way. And he could be as sorry as he wanted, but I said, I don't know whether it's possible for you to change. And he said, I'm going to prove I can change. He never touched her like that again. That is a fact.
Now, what does that have to do with Mexico City?
Well, it has to do with Mexico City in that we fell in love, and we both wanted to leave our mates behind. And one of the ways that Lee decided he would volunteer to take this material to Mexico City, where it could be handed off to a Cuban, and then he could stay. But what he'd do, he's going to have a new identity. And he told his wife that he is going to go to Cuba, and she's never going to hear from him again. She believed it. They cried because even Lee thought, well, I don't know how many years it'll be before I see my children again. So they were crying a lot. The idea is she thought he was going to go to Cuba, but he would really be staying in Mexico. It's very important to the story of how they got him down there that way, because we wanted to start a new life, and I wanted to get out of there too. I had married a man. I thought I loved him. I actually was in love with sex. That's easy when you're young and I was one of these liberated women, and all that kind of, oh my gosh. But anyway, to make a long story short, we wanted desperately to get to have our own life together. And one of the easy ways is if we could vanish in Mexico. And they had promised me a new passport. Heck, they had already taken my birth certificates away and everything.
Who are they?
Well, whoever was running us, it's not like they say, hey, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm CIA. It isn't like that. You try and get your birth certificate, and you can't. You need like I needed a Social Security number. I didn't know how I was going to get one without, well, they arranged that, and I got my Social Security number in New Orleans out of nowhere. So, they can make documents, and we were assured that, we could become informants for the CIA simply because Lee was pretending to be pro-Castro. We could pretend in Mexico that he's pro-Castro, but he's going to have a new name and everything. I will too. So we can marry and we can get away. And at that time, more than anything, I wanted to get away from the fact that these people were killing people. I did not want to be associated with a biological weapon that had been developed that could be used against anybody at any time. It was totally against everything. And Dr. Mary Sherman said, look, I'll put you through medical school in Mexico. They spent a lot of time there in South America and in Mexico and all that. She and Dr. Oxner, she had a lot of contacts. So the idea was I was going to go and get my degree. Lee was going to want to become a writer, and we wanted to have a farm and all this thing and raise our kids and just have a whole new name. Well, to do that.
How is Lee going to get divorced? Or is he going to just disappear?
Well, if you disappear and you land in Cuba and nobody can find you again, that's where she thought he was going. And meanwhile, he has a new name ID, new passport, everything. It's completely different. And she goes on with her life. No, we were going to get quickie divorces. We found out that you had, what was her name? Anyway, we had this actress that she...
Oh, the famous Mexican divorce back in the days.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So you could get it 24 hours. You could get a quickie divorce.
Okay.
We were going to do that because we weren't particularly religious or anything like that. It was just a piece of paper. Let's get rid of it, And Lee and I had fallen deeply in love. He had protected me, and incidents had happened. He really, literally saved my life once. Or at least I'll put it this way, from damage. He stepped out there and a sailor was going to hit me with a knife. There are other things like that going on, and it was just wonderful as I say, we fell in love.
Well, so Mexico, there was an escape plan to Mexico, but you didn't go to Mexico.
Well, now, wait a minute. I was ready. David Ferry gave me a book. It was a library book. It's interesting because it was stamped Eglin Air Force Library, okay? And Eglin Air Force, I was supposed to go there, and Alexander Rourke and his friend Jeffrey Sullivan, who was a pilot, were going to pick me up there and fly me to Mexico, to an area called Cancun. And boy, have I got information on that, because they tried to say that Cancun nothing was there at that time, and I'm lying. Well, now, by the way, I've not one, but 15 witnesses that Cancun had all the materials we needed. It was a CIA base and all kinds of things, okay, at that time.
So what happened to... So
I was going to go there, and he was going to meet me there, yeah.
Okay, so Rourke and Sullivan were going to fly you down, and what happened to Rourke and Sullivan?
Well, the very day that Lee crosses over, he gets on a bus, okay, after flying all over the place to make it look like he never went to Mexico City. In Houston, he gets on a bus, and he has a bus ticket for that. And as he's crossing over the border, he has to stop because he found out information. He's got to contact me. He calls me, I don't know, around 11:30 midnight, okay, pretty late.
How did he contact you?
Well, we had a call wheel set up. And boy, this thing is very clever. You have to see how it is in my book and explain.
Okay.
We had 4 different phone numbers we could use. So if I said, I'm calling you, I'll be calling you tomorrow, that code might mean I'll call you 1 hour later at this different phone. We had all these codes set up like that. We were playing cops and robbers, you might say, ourselves, trying to beat the odds here and try to stay together. And so he calls me and he says, Rourke and Sullivan have been shot down. The day that they were supposed to go and pick me up, I was supposed to go to the library there, get through the base and go to the library there at Eglin Air Force Base, wait in the library. I had the book in my hand that had a name written in it, okay, that would recognize me. Now, I was scared of them. I actually bought a gun. What if they dumped me in the Gulf of Mexico or something on the way, to Mexico?
Where is Eglin Air Force Base?
Eglin Air Force Base is near Pensacola, Florida. It's the biggest Air Force base at that time, at least, that I know of. And all kinds of CIA ops were going to and from Cuba and all over from there.
So you were going to go from your place in Florida where you had
I was, I had been sent back to Florida.
You were sent back to Florida and told, shut up.
That's
and be
right.
quiet, and you're not involved in this anymore
right.
of stuff.
Because I'd objected to their using live prisoners.
Right. So you were supposed to meet at Eglin Air Force Base, identify yourself with this book and stuff, and they were going to fly you to the...
I still have the book.
You have all the stuff on
Yeah,
this.
I kept it all.
So you were going to go to the Yucatan and then eventually connect up with Lee somehow in Mexico?
Yeah, he was supposed to drop that off, and then he's going to vanish. Now, what's really cool is that part of the CIA, they're compartmentalized. Part of the CIA was cooperating with him with this. So they have to pretend he never went to Mexico City at all so that he can disappear in Cuba, remember, and all that. So when we have Dallas asking, hey, we know he went down there. We need pictures. And they send back a picture that's completely not him. Everybody knows this.
This is after the Kennedy assassination.
No, this is in October.
Okay.
So that's what you see. He's already trying to hide. This is way before Kennedy assassination. I mean, we're talking about October 6th is when they asked, or 7th is when they asked. He left October 3rd from Mexico. Okay, but they want to see his photographs, because they want the evidence that he went there. See, because they want to frame him. That's what it turns out.
So one part of the
one of them's trying to protect him.
One part of the CIA is trying to protect him.
Yeah.
One part of the CIA is trying to frame him.
Yeah, and by the way, those two don't necessarily like each other. David Phillips is the one running this to frame Lee, and he's like a newcomer and encroacher. And you have Win Scott here who knows this guy's going to try and take over everything. He's not going to tell him everything. So they're not getting along that well. And so later, of course, when Scott dies, his files are all taken out of his, all of a sudden they're taken out of his safe and they disappear. By James Jesus Angleton.
James Jesus Angleton.
Who Angleton is someone working with Mossad, that is with Israel, and against Kennedy, you might say, all right, and the Vatican, and he is a sleeper agent in charge of assassinations and all kinds of hanky-pank for the CIA. Mainly he's in charge of all kinds of overseas operations with the CIA. And he's always looking for moles. Who is cheating on us? Who's really with the Soviets?
It turns out there are a lot of people cheating on us.
That's right. And in fact, Angleton was so angry that Lee Oswald came back alive. He said, Lee said, why don't you trust me? He said, I don't trust you because you didn't come back in a coffin.
Well, so Lee was in Mexico. Did he take a vial with him?
He was actually trained on how to keep this stuff alive because it's not that easy. And he had a way to fix it so he could keep it alive for 7 or 8 days, even though no light and different things like that. He learned how to do a sterile, exchange of fluids and stuff. And so, I mean, he was given special training. And it looks like an ordinary thermos. He had 2 thermoses, one with an extra change of fluids. And some packets looks like sugar, but those were actually the nutrients that the cancer cells needed to stay alive. So when he goes, for example, to the Soviets, he's trying to get a transit visa to Cuba. What in the heck is going on? When he got there, he's supposed to just hand this off and bingo, disappear. And we were all set for that. First of all, Jeffrey Sullivan and Alexander Rourke are shot down. All of a sudden, I don't have my ride. And he has to risk and call me and say, don't go to Eglin Air Force Base. We're going to have to get you on a commercial flight. We'll have to figure something else out after I get there, So I have my suitcase is packed. I've got my gun, that kind of thing. And where's Lee? He has got to keep going. He's got this stuff to deliver to the contact. First of all, he puts all his stuff down at the Friends. It's a Quaker place. He trusted the Quakers. He had been trained by Quakers. There's a long story on that. That's why he trusted Ruth Paine with his wife. She was a Quaker, so-called and all. All right, so he goes to his Quaker house and puts his stuff there. Then he runs right away immediately to put the canister down in a souvenir shop, and he waits. He waits to see somebody pick it up, and then he can leave. That's it. Nobody comes. He is so exposed. Why? Now, sometimes something could happen. The guy died. Maybe something happened. He got caught or he couldn't do it. So Lee has to have a backup. Well, he's got a list of backups, but wait a minute. The only backups that are going to work is he has to actually take a flight into Cuba at the airport, and there you can contact them. Hey, that didn't go through. Here it is, and drop it off and then go. That's called a transit. You don't even go into the country, Cuba itself. Now, why in the world, the outside world, say, why would Lee Oswald want a transit visa through Cuba? He can't say, hey, I want this, and then I want to go straight back to Mexico and hide. He can't say he's going to Mexico, so he says, no, I'm going to the Soviet Union. Now, you can go straight from Mexico. You could fly straight to the Soviet Union. So it's really crazy. And so they're saying he's nuts. He's crazy. He wants to go and make a transit flight to Cuba.
He was going partway. On this thing, but to get to the part way, he had to act like he was going to go to Russia.
That's right.
Which
and he couldn't say he's going to Mexico because that would give away that he's going to stay there.
Right. So that sets up the believability also of, wow, he's going to go to Russia. So this is another part where he's getting in deeper and deeper on this, and they're going to say, oh, look, he was conspiring with the Russians. In case we want to decide to blame the Russians for what happened to Kennedy, which is something that some people in the government wanted to do, because there were different segments of the government that had different desires with Cuba, and some wanted to expand it to Russia. Some people in the military actually wanted to, and this is all documented. There are documents on this stuff that wanted to actually use this as an excuse to do a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Now, then you got a whole bunch of people that don't want that to happen.
Right.
So anyway, so here's Dallas. They're saying, hey, we want to make sure we want proof that he's got there. So send us the photos. We don't have any photos. They send a photo of somebody that doesn't look anything like him. That's why that happened.
So a couple of questions here. One is, what was Sylvia Duran? What was she doing over there? Second part is, well, if he was in Mexico and he's thinking about going to Cuba, or there's some other people may say he was planning to go to Russia, why is he back in Dallas?
All right. Yes. It's very interesting how all that happened, because you've got David Atlee Phillips, who definitely just wants him down there so they can go and frame him, say he was there to collude with the Russians. You've got some hints, and they're really important. Like you have... he has to go. It turns out that he goes to the consulate. Now, there's a consulate and there is the regular embassy for the Cuba. To get his transit visa to go so he can show up and hand this stuff over, he's got to get a transit visa. That means, hey, I just want to go through Cuba and maybe go to a restaurant there while I'm waiting for the plane at the most, and then I'm on my way to USSR. Well, they said, well, wait a minute. She says, Sylvia Duran, he's talking to her. She's a secretary there at the consulate for the Cubans. He said, you wait a minute, you've got to have a visa. Russia's not going to take you. Where's your visa? Oh, no, I've got to go to the Russians. So he goes over to the Russians. And now remember, we wanted to pretend like we were spies, that we were all pro-Russian, we're pro-communist, all that, and we are going to inform the CIA. And the FBI, we don't want the FBI to know any of that, all right? Because they're not getting along. CIA and FBI, they're not buddies down there. CIA is supposed to be doing things out of the country, not the FBI. But it's well known the FBI was all involved down there in Mexico.
And the CIA is not supposed to be doing stuff in the United States.
Exactly.
And they're doing stuff in the United States.
So they're all messed up. But the point is Lee and I are going to have our ordinary life. We're going to inform all the time to the FBI. So the last thing we want is going to say, FBI is after us. Got it? Because we have it on records that the Russians said, Lee comes in there and sets down a gun. And he says, look what I have to defend myself because the FBI is after me. That's why he said that. I need that visa. And really, if he had enough money with him or something like that, which he didn't have at the time, he probably could have bribed them. They might have given him a transit visa to Russia, and then he can transfer out of there, They are not going to do it. And then he comes again. And he says something else very telling. He says, I only have 3 days. And it's right there in the record. They're trying to say that never happened, that the Russians lied. They had no reason to lie about somebody says, I only had 3 days. Why would you lie about something like that? He said, I only have 3 days. And they said, what do you mean? You've got a 2-week visa. You've got like 10 days left. What do you mean 3 days? In 3 days, that biological weapon would have been dead. It's all the time he had left to try and get it handed off.
Okay. So what happened? He wasn't able to hand it off.
No, he wasn't able to hand it off. He tried. He decided to sleep with Sylvia Duran, the secretary, with all his cute baby gray blue eyes that he had and his puppy dog ways, which are adorable. And she slept with him. And now why would he tell me that? Why? Because we were supposed to live in Mexico. And if he's got to go and have an affair with somebody in order to get information to the FBI, why? She was sleeping with Carlos Lechuga, who had been the ambassador for Cuba. Okay, now he's ambassador to the UN. He's big and important. If he does that, that's valuable. That is valuable to the CIA, and they will want to keep him there.
Okay, so this is really interesting how the intelligence agencies, not a big surprise, there's heavy use of sex and seduction.
Oh, yeah.
And to get information, to keep information.
Well, he's got to tell me about it because I'm his wife. I want to be his wife,
Yeah. Okay. So anything else about Mexico City right now?
Well, yes. The most important, I suppose, is that he thought he was going to be able to stay. And suddenly, because Phillips got a lot of power, okay, they order him back, and their excuse is, right now we couldn't let you get and pick that up. They only wanted him down there as a decoy to get him down there, so they could go and say he's colluding as he's trying to get this thing. If he didn't do anything, say, oh, they didn't show up, big deal. He's got to show some kind of action, or they're going to say, what's going on? Aren't you on our side? You're supposed to deliver this stuff if you can.
Right.
So he's got to make some kind of effort, but he makes sure he does not want to end up in Cuba or anything like that. So he makes an idiot and fool of himself. Now, we have a really neat thing. It's called 2 photographs. She said, you have to have passport photos. Where's he going to get passport? Well, he had them. He came back no time with them. Obviously, you can tell they were made at a different time, different clothes. Those were the passport photos he was going to use on his new passport, you see. So he hands that to her, and one of them gets stapled on there. That is a big indication that he had those ready, but it wasn't supposed to be for that. It was supposed to be for his new passport.
But he had to use it for the visa.
He had to use those photos, so you'll see they look different, because he makes himself look a little different in the picture. So it doesn't look quite like him. He's pursing his lips and stuff like that. And wearing clothes he never wore anywhere else. You won't see those clothes anywhere else. So all that's going on. And then they're saying, like, maybe the photos were fake. No, they're not. It was him. So he's tried, but unfortunately, he said, well, look, sorry, we have to have you come back. Why? Well, we didn't have that stuff picked up. We had Hurricane Flora was coming through, and we knew that Castro was going to have all his medical staff was going to be all over the island trying to help people. They're not going to have his injections. They're not going to have his x-rays and all that. We're going to send you down right before Christmas or right after Christmas. Once you come back to Dallas. And by the way, your baby's about to be born, so you've got a good reason to be able to see that baby. We'll put you in a temporary job, and then you'll be back by Christmas in Mexico.
Perfect. So that's how he got back to Dallas.
That's how he got back, and boy, was he upset. And he said, well, you know what? I'm going to take a temporary job. That's why he was able to be maneuvered into that temporary job at the Texas School Book Depository. They even fired 2 people the day that he was hired there. It was such an inside job.
Okay. So that takes us to Dallas and the lead up to...
I was left behind waiting. What's going to happen? He said, well, don't worry, because by Christmas, I'm going to be back. And, then we're going to put you on a plane. We'll get you there. He had given me $400, equivalent $4,000. So I had plenty of money to reach him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a wrap on episode 2, Judyth Baker interview. This part was Mexico City. Thank you, Judyth.
You're welcome.